Hello out there, and taking a look today at the newly released Spyderco Wharncliffe Endura, and having a little trouble with lighting and also trying to fit the knife into the frame of the video because this is a pretty darn long knife. You can see 8.5 inches plus of overall length. So this is going to be a knife that, right off the bat, I'll tell you, isn't really ever going to end up in my pocket. I actually am serving as the middleman for a transaction with this knife, so it isn't mine, but I did want to check it out because the new Wharncliffe version of the Endura sort of makes it more appealing, and I haven't actually handled a Delica or an Endura for a while now. It's been a while since I've had either of them in my collection. Haven't carried them. I do have a Mass Drop Delica pre-ordered that's been on pre-order for like a year. So I don't know if that's going to be coming anytime soon, but yeah, I was interested in taking a look at this knife, and there are some pretty cool things to talk about with it, and one thing that I always forget about the Enduras and Delicas that we'll get to in just a minute, but let's start with the just the overall size of it. Like I said, outside of my size range, just because of, you know, it's just not really necessary for what I'm looking for in a carry, but I mean, I know there's a lot of people who wouldn't really see it that way. Here's that CRKT seismic that we talked about in the last video, and you can see it just dwarfs the Endura. And the big dimension, though, is width. And I think what the Endura really has going for it in terms of the size specs is that even though it is long, it is still very like thin and streamlined and super light. So if we take a look at it on the scale, this one's coming in at 3.37 ounces, which is ridiculous just compared to a lot of the other things that are out there that are a lot smaller. Case and Southern Grind, CG01, over 4 ounces. Let me see what else I have here. So VV Backlash, weighing more, you know, so this is a lot lighter knife than plenty of knives that are larger than it. So it definitely does have that going for it. Here's a good one. Let's take a look. Kershaw Bare Knuckle. There you go. 3.57 ounces. And let's line them up and give you a look at the size comparison there. So definitely a lot of extra length to the Endura, about half an inch plus overall length, and actually sort of similar cutting edge. So yeah, we do have a cutting edge that's right around 3.5 inches on the Endura. So yeah, it's odd because I say that it's too long, and it just sort of feels a lot longer when you're holding it versus the bare knuckle, even though the cutting edge really is comparable. And that's odd, you know, it's just one of those things about knives where you can't just look at the specs with things because your preference might change based on how those specs are actually used. And yeah, this knife just feels way longer than that bare knuckle. Maybe it is just the fact that it's one long Wharncliffe blade here. I really do like the blade shape. I was interested to see how it would look on the Endura line versus the Delica, and how much broader and taller the blade would be. I think looking at it, one, that it's really attractive, and two, I immediately thought, man, if they ever make a bird version of this, they'd have to call it the Toucan, because this is just a big beak, you know? It's a big beak of a knife, and really attractive, going to be really good for utility, obviously, just being that Wharncliffe shape, which has always been a favorite of mine. The big win of this, and always with the Delica or the Endura, is the ergonomics. You know, just the amount of space that you have on the handle, but also the jimping is always excellent. Just the shape of the ramp, it's a big win. And then the other thing that I always forget about when I don't have one of these knives in my collection is just how good the FRN is on these models. I've seen a lot of plasticky scales. I've seen a lot of glass-filled nylon, fiberglass reinforced nylon, you know, the works. But when it comes to scales like this, they have, I'm not going to say perfected it, but I don't think there's anyone who's doing it better than Spyderco with these two models. I mean, their version of it is just top of the line in, I think, the entire industry, and just the density of it feels perfect. The quality of it, it doesn't feel like it's cheap the way that a lot of plastic scales do. And, you know, one of my big qualms when I had the bird meadowlark and also the Ganzo version of that, you know, and I gave those bad reviews. It was because of the way the scales felt, not because of the way they looked, but because of how they felt, like just the density, and they were too light and they didn't feel like they were like well built. And these feel like quality scales, and so can't really explain that except to feel it in person versus a bunch of other stuff, and then you'll really understand it. Now, I have heard that the new Civivi Wyvern has some FRN scales that are like totally on point, and I'm looking forward to getting that knife in hand and seeing what it's like compared to the FRN here. But for now, I'll still maintain that it's probably the best in the industry that I know of. Moving on back, we do have the typical 4-position pocket clip. You do have the big lanyard hole. A lot of people will be swapping this out with Lynch clips, which is perfectly fine. But I've always liked this clip. I like the standard Spyderco clip. I'm not sure if this would usually be a satin clip, but for some reason here it's black and it looks good. It is a lockback. We're going to get back to the lockback aspect of it in a second, and just how smooth this knife is, because that is pretty cool. In the closed position, let's take a look and bring back the bare knuckle. And I think here is a little bit more of a difference where, you know, you can see just the size of the Endura just, you know, being a little bit more significant in this position versus the bare knuckle, which doesn't seem as like chunky top to bottom the way this one does. But yeah. So here's the fun part, guys. Here's the most fun part of this knife, is that it is ridiculously smooth. So you can see, just actuating it, it just starts to drop, right? Lockup on this is excellent, so there's no issue there. Hopefully I'm going to be able to do this on camera. If not, well, even if I can, I will slide in a video that I posted on Instagram the other day about this. But this is something different for me for lockbacks. So this knife, you can, if you have it in hand the right way, you can depress the locking mechanism and swing it shut like an axis lock or a compression lock or something like that. You know, and let me see if I can do it right now. Probably going to be a fail. No, there we go. All right. So pretty cool. And like I said, you're probably watching the video of me doing it a couple times the other day. But the thing that's neat about that is that makes this a little bit more of a fidgety kind of knife. And I'm not going to say I recommend closing the knife this way all the time, because it's not easy, and it's definitely not as safe as other ways, especially if your finger gets in there, so don't screw around with it. But the point is that one of the big drawbacks of lockbacks is they don't have that fidget factor, and fidget factor just makes a knife fun. And I recently did a video about the Spyderco Native 5 and about how it's such a great model, but I always end up selling it, and I was trying to figure out why, and so many people said it's because it doesn't have a fidget factor, and they were probably right. I mean, to be honest, they were probably right. It just isn't as much fun. It's great to use, great to cut with, but if you value other aspects of things apart from just cutting with knives, and honestly, if I have as many knives as I do, then I certainly value more than just cutting, because I really don't need as many knives as I have. But the point is that that this sort of makes it a little bit more fun. And I've never seen a lockback. I know they exist, and I know other people have been able to do it with other models, but I've never personally seen a lockback that I could do that with. And that comes from having enough like ergonomic room on the handle to do it, but also just being really smooth. And this is out of box, no lubrication, nothing like that. So pretty cool there. The price point of this knife, it comes in at right around, I think, 81 bucks. That's in the VG10 steel. I know there are going to be a lot of collectors and people who don't like VG10 who might wait for a sprint run or, you know, something in a better steel, and that's understandable. For me, VG10 is a good mid-grade steel. I like it. I think it resharpens pretty easily. Really good corrosion resistance, especially when you compare it to the other like steels that I sort of put in its class, like CTS BD1 and also a Sandvik 14 C28N. So I don't really have a big problem with VG10 for EDC. I think that a lot of places, or in a lot of cases, it's a little bit more expensive than it should be, especially on some of the Spyderco models. But here, it's sort of sort of close to being too expensive, but for 81 bucks, if this is a model that you really like, I think that you'll be happy with it. All right, guys, so that's my take on it. Any questions, comments, complaints, suggestions, as always, let me know down below. I appreciate you watching. Take care, and I'll talk with you soon. Have a good one.